there was a need for a new way to look at life and living. And the COVID crisis gives us that opportunity to think about life and living. And it seemed like there was something that was not being used fully, resources that are available in a place like Kerala, and particularly the old institutions. And we came together and felt we should grow this idea of a valley, the Ayush Valley, Ayush in the sense of good health and living. And we are very fortunate to have with us Dr. Narendra Bhatt, Dr. J L N Sastry, and Cornelis Peters to take us through ways in which we can go through this crisis, the ongoing COVID crisis, and also reflect a little bit on how we might be missing out on certain opportunities that are well appreciated in Ayurveda and the other Indian systems of health and well-being, and how we might be able to revisit those areas. And together with these knowledgeable people, we are in a position to explore these areas better. And I feel there are a lot of areas where things are going on, but they are suboptimal in the way they are explored, in the way they are presented, in the way they are projected in the country and across the world. Whether we can correct these and how quickly we can correct these, I don't know. Experienced people like yourself are in a better position to comment on this. I take this opportunity to quickly run through a few images that I hope will set the scene for why the India problem is very special, not only for India, but also for the rest of the world. And you are all familiar with, these images. Now, Jasila, could somebody turn on my screen sharing, please? In the meanwhile, the way we are going to proceed, it'll be informal. I want you to share what is in your mind, thoughts that you have, particularly in the context of what is described in the Ayurvedic texts, yoga texts, and any other things that commentaries that you are more familiar with, and also where we're shaping a little more formally with research agendas in this space. If I can turn my screen on, I will just quickly take you through and set the space for where we should be going. This is where we are. This is news from a few days ago. Not many people understand the complexities of such a pandemic when it comes to India. And the question raised here is very interesting. This is possibly an underestimate, the 23 million. We have many more people moving away from the cities, going out to the villages. India offers complexities that most other nations of the world don't understand. In terms of clinical research and clinical findings, this is a study that came out from UK, about 17,000 patients who presented in hospital. And it's fascinating to see the kind of features in these patients. And keep in mind, these are people who've come to the hospital. They're present with cough and fever, shortness of breath, and so on, a long series of symptoms. And what we see here, median age, slightly older people. When we look at the data slightly more closely, this is what we see. Susceptibility more in older people, very infrequent in younger people. Up to about 40, 45, most people get the infection, they have symptoms, but they come out of it, they don't need hospitalization. And this kind of data, I don't know if this is available for any of the other countries, but it'll be valuable to gather this information. The other worrying thing that we've seen is most of the people who come to the hospitals for care have other conditions, underlying conditions, particularly heart disease, diabetes, pulmonary diseases, kidney disease, asthma, and a little bit of dementia, and so on. And this is again a spectrum that we see for UK. Whether this is the same for other countries and whether other countries are monitoring this kind of, with this level of clarity, I don't know. What this presents is a huge confusion to the clinician. What is the care to be given? And this is UK's National Institute for Health and Clinical Excellence presentation, where frailty is a big factor that's taken into account. We have protocols coming from this one from Italy, where they haven't thought too much about the frailty aspect, but they're looking at treatments, what these treatments are. You're all familiar with, very confusing treatments. Now, the consensus that is coming out is what I've highlighted in this dotted box here. How long are people infectious? And what are the body fluids that are infectious? Simple questions about diagnosis. Do we have a good way to diagnose this disease? Some people say yes, some people say no. There is some confusion there. And this issue is very important. Who should we treat early and with what drugs? Early treatment tending towards prophylaxis. Is the immune system in some patients doing more harm than good? I'll come into this slowly. And what infections, what are the other things that we see? So approximately, these are the kind of questions being asked. When we look at the analysis, the world in terms of where trials are going on, this is what we see. This is a very fascinating website. This was data accessed till April. If you go and you look at where the trials are being conducted, a lot in China, a lot in America, this was on the 28th of April. Things have changed on from there. 31st of May, this is spectrum. There are trials of different kinds, interventional trials, observational trials. And for me, what is very depressing is the number of diagnostic trials that are going on. There were almost none going on here. Towards the later part, we are still very weak in diagnosis. Again, accessed on the 25th of June. China still is a predominant player. There are a few trials in India, 89, 415 in America, and so on. And if we look at a spectrum of these trials, this is what is happening. Now, all of this is important to learn how to live with COVID. We need to learn very quickly how to live with this virus. This virus is not going to go away. It's going to be with us. How are we going to cope with it? We know a lot about the genetics of this virus, the DNA sequence, the strains, and how they have evolved in different parts of the world and how they are continuing to evolve. What we also known for a long time is how this virus infects cells. And we know that you need this important protein, the angiotensin converting enzyme protein, which is the functional receptor for this virus. And this was work done as early as 2004 from the Netherlands. And we know that this ACE2 protein is expressed in many, many parts of the cell. And the one I want to highlight is in endothelial cells. Now, there is a lot to learn about how we can come up with treatments when we know this kind of information in detail. A lot of publications that are now citing this paper from 2004, there are at least about 500 papers some showing how plants and mineral supplementation can be used for treating COVID. Now, this treatment is a confusing term. We want to discuss this. More recently, a few days ago, this is work from Japan talking about mini organoids, mini organs, work being done at Kyoto University by this small team of stem cell biologists. They make little organoids, and they can use it to assay for virus infection. So shown here, the white things are viruses. And maybe this is an opportunity for all of us to see if we can start to use such fine experimental systems to understand. Now, this is the extreme part of the virus infection. Shown here is very likely what happens. We know this from influenza virus. We also feel something similar is what is happening with COVID. There is a problem with the virus infecting the endothelial cells, which in turn causes a whole series of biochemical physiological changes that lead to coagulation within the system. And when we look at it more closely, these are the kind of things that we are learning, that there are neutrophils that are being triggered into action. They start to form these things called nets, neutrophil extracellular traps, which are helpful, but they can also be very harmful. And we know that, for instance, nets have a role in thrombosis associated with stroke. And this is where we are. This is the kind of scenario that we have. And this is the bigger theme that we want to fit all this into, in terms of where we want to go in terms of teaching people how to live with this virus. So with that, I open our platform to our first contributor, Dr. Bhatt. Dr. Bhatt, everybody knows Dr. Bhatt very well. I wouldn't want to spend too much time introducing Dr. Bhatt, but I just want to say that in one of his previous lives, he was also CEO for Zandu Pharmaceuticals, which is one of the old Ayurveda-based pharma companies in the world. So we have two other speakers, Dr. J L N Sastry, a very respected academician. Dr. Sastry has written a wonderful textbook on Dravyaguna, used to teach in Chandigarh, and after that used to work for Dabur as head of the scientific research group, and now appointed fairly recently as the CEO of the National Medicinal Plant Board. And joining us from Netherlands is Cornelis Peter, who runs a center in Netherlands. And he studied medicine in Netherlands and might well know the team from Groningen who've done the work on ACE2 receptors. So I take the opportunity now to leave the floor to Dr. Bhatt. Dr. Bhatt, welcome to the Ayush Valley's first webinar. The floor is yours, sir.